Hello and welcome to the Managing Madrid podcast. I'm your host Kian Sabani, doing a solo Q&A session live on YouTube. So welcome to everyone who is here live on YouTube with me. Welcome to everyone who is listening to this maybe hours later on the podcast feed or on YouTube. What's up, guys? Thanks for joining. Super impromptu. We're pretty light on content right now. There's not much to talk about. It's a great time of year. There's no international games yet. There's a few games in the Premier League and Serie A, and I'm hoping to watch Brahim Diaz versus Fiorentina starting in about 22 minutes. Cutting it close. I don't know if I've never done a podcast that short before, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, generally speaking, though, in the Real Madrid universe is pretty slow. We're reporting on international call-ups, and beyond that, there's not much happening. So I thought I would fire this up on YouTube, get some content out, interact with you guys a little bit because I miss you guys, and it's very rare that we kind of take questions and stuff. So apart from the mailbag, which happens on patreon.com/managingmadrid once a week. So I thought I would go through the comments live on YouTube as they come in, and we'll take it from there. So let's go through. I'm just going to go through chronological order, and I'll just whatever catches my eye, and I'm trying not to discriminate. Although I will say I will try to prioritize questions that we don't normally discuss on a day-to-day basis already. So let's start going through them. And if I miss them, no hard feelings. It probably just means I didn't really see it. There's already so many comments. So Somnath1235 says, "Hi, Kian. Can Asensio act as our backup striker?" Yeah, technically speaking, he's built for a false nine role. He's a really good finisher. He's a good link-up player. And just one second. Those are the two main things. He's a good ball carrier. He's someone who can drop deep. He can do the link-up stuff that Benzema does. Yeah, in theory, I think he can. Dark Knight says, "Tell us about your thoughts on Ronaldo not congratulating Benzema." I mean, how is that a story? I gotta love the media sometimes just because it's so amusing that they can come up with a headline where they ask Benzema a question, "Has Ronaldo congratulated you yet?" And he says, "No, not yet." And that becomes a big story and we all go crazy over it. Are we surprised and should we care? The answer is no and no. I'm not surprised and nor do I really care. Just Amaridisa says, "Hey, Kian, should Real Madrid go all in on Bellingham?" I love Bellingham. I've said this many times. I think his profile fits perfectly. A lot of people saying, "Well, do we need a midfielder? He's not priority." Is he as prioritized as other positions in the team? No, not necessarily. But this idea that like we have so many midfielders and all this, we can't fit him in is borderline nonsense to me because Modric and Kroos are either going to leave at the same time or very close to each other, and it's going to happen relatively soon. And when that time comes, you want to be set up for the future already. Camavinga is still really raw and young, and from the perspective of replacing Luka Modric, Bellingham covers that kind of ground defensively, and he's also a great creator. So I think he fits perfectly in a post Modric world. So yeah, I think if you can get him, you try to get him. Faiz Mohammed says, "What about Saka for the right wing spot?" I'm a huge fan. I don't know necessarily if Real Madrid would necessarily see him as someone they would break the bank for, given that they have Rodrygo and Fede Valverde there. So there's that to think about. Praveen Kumar says, "Number of players targeting Vinicius. The lad is going to get injured pretty soon from one of these challenges. What are your thoughts on this?" Yeah, I've been pretty vocal about this, that the league needs to crack down on these challenges. It's unbelievable. I mean, he had that, sarcastic or half sarcastic, half serious tweet after the Cadiz game that he's still not injured. He made it another day without injury. I think that's a really I think there's actually a lot of relief in that tweet when he tweeted that. I mean, it's amazing that he's gone this far without getting seriously injured, and I'm really worried about it. I mean, a lot of teams can only stop him by being really physically aggressive with him, and that's fine in one sense. But when there is no accountability for these challenges and the referees, this has been happening all season, but we'll take the most recent example because it's fresh in our minds against Cadiz when Ivan Alejo had numerous dangerous challenges on him. And this goes back to many games in La Liga this season. And those challenges don't get punished with fouls and yellow cards and and even worse were some of those challenges. I think if you add up the yellow cards, some of these Ivan Alejo should have been sent off. When you're not holding those players accountable, it starts to tell the teams in the La Liga like, oh, we're allowed to basically kick the shit out of him because the referees don't give a fuck. So excuse my language. This is YouTube live, whatever. Um, when you when teams see that and they see that they're allowed to basically do all these things and not being held accountable for their actions, at some point there's going to be a line that's crossed if it hasn't been crossed already where they actually injure him. And then everyone's going to be like, well, you should have done something sooner. So yeah, this is a huge thing that the league needs to figure out. And I said this many times before. I posted a YouTube short about it. Someone asked me on Instagram, are the refs fair to Vinicius? The answer is no. And also, when the league is suffering, the the production value is down. Fans are gravitating towards the Premier League for many reasons. La Liga is not as exciting as it was a few years ago. And your star player, one of the star players in the league who is bringing you eyeballs, he is a joy to watch. You're basically letting the entire league just kick the shit out of him and it's not getting punished for. And I'm not even saying like you make an exception for Vinicius. No, I'm just saying you be normal and do the right thing and protect the players. That's it. It's very simple. All right. Nasim Nawab says, hey, Keon, great job, buddy. Will you be doing podcasts during World Cup on World Cup teams? Yeah. So I'll give you guys a rundown of what we're doing. We're covering every single Real Madrid player who's playing in the World Cup. And so all the staff have their assignments. One staff writer is taking Spain, someone else is taking France, someone else is taking Croatia, Belgium, etc. We go on a list. We're covering every single Real Madrid player in written form. We're also doing multiple podcasts during the World Cup per week to discuss everything that's happening. So we'll be very, very busy. We are not taking a break during the World Cup at all. Our break is now essentially in the week leading up to the World Cup. We're taking it easy, but during the World Cup, we are all hands on deck. And also, if you guys are listening to this or watching this from Canada, we are doing an in-person podcast in Toronto on the weekend of the World Cup final. So it's going to be either the 15th, 16th, or 17th or 18th. We're looking at those 4 days, and we're finalizing the venue, date, and time. So stay tuned for that. If you're in Toronto, no brainer, you better come. If you're in Ontario, no brainer, you better drive down. If you're in Canada, no brainer, just fly in. It's a very rare chance. I won't say it's last chance. We're trying to do Toronto once a year if we can, although no promises. But we're so busy that I just can't guarantee we'll always be doing these podcasts in person. So if you've been wanting to come see us, and Toronto, last time we were there was an amazing crowd. I'm looking forward to meeting you guys for a second or third time, some of you, and also meeting some new faces. So make sure to come out in Toronto. So that's what we're doing during the World Cup. All right, let's see where we are now. Pravish Jane says, do you think Luis Enrique has a Barcelona bias as the coach of the Spanish national team? I think the interesting thing about Lucho, and I'm not going to necessarily get into the Barca bias or this bias or anti-Madrid or whatever. I'll just speak to him about him as like the general things he's been doing. The one main criticism I have of Spain, apart from some of the tactical flaws that we've seen in these qualifiers and also the UEFA Nations League, he doesn't know his best 11 yet. No one knows his best 11. And that also was a problem of continuity and forming rhythm. You're already behind so many national teams who have a nucleus that has been playing together for a long time, and they know each other's runs and passes like the inside of their palm. With Spain, it almost seems like every single game, the 11 is drawn out of a hat, and you really don't know what to expect. And that's one criticism I have, is that when you don't know your best 11 heading into the World Cup, that's a problem. Second thing is, when you look at his squad selection, beyond whatever teams they're coming from, ignore that for a second. The other main criticism I have is that there is no real clear definition of what he values. It's clearly not based on playing time. I mean, and this goes back a long time. Remember when he came out in the press conference and basically when he cut Ramos and other people that were obviously deserving of a call up, he said, "Look, you need to play if you're going to be called up." And then he calls up Eric Garcia, who was not playing at all for Manchester City. So that didn't add up. So one is that he playing time does not indicate anything. Current form doesn't tell us anything because if you look at a lot of the players who were omitted are in much better form than some of the players who are in the squad. For example, Koke is in the squad over Mikel Merino. That doesn't add up. Eric Garcia over Nacho, for example. Nacho has been great every time he's played, and he has more experience. Go down the list. There's so many great players who missed out in the World Cup. So that's that. So it's not based on playing time. It's not based on form. It's certainly not based on experience. It's not even based on past form. And I think my prediction for this Spain team is that you'll see a lot of. I think you'll see this team play well. Is my prediction, and maybe even surprise some people. And then we might even get the whole, oh look, see, Lucho knew way more than we did. You should have listened to him. He was right. And ultimately, I think they'll probably lose in the World Cup. They'll be eliminated and call it a moral victory. And then we'll all ask, wait, moral victory? What? Why not actually just make this better? Like, there's going to be a lot of questions like, how could have this been better? And those are when the question marks are going to arise. I think he may make the Spain team play well. I think he may even surprise some people. But there's always a question of, could this have been better with them? And I think that's when you look at the squad selection and you just kind of like scratch your head. Was this really the best team? All right. Watersul Ahnaf says, "Hey Kian, do you still think we don't need any offensive reinforcements?" I mean, I thought we didn't need them, and I don't think my stance has changed. My stance was always the same. It's that if you're going to sign an offensive reinforcement, they better be good enough to justify taking playing time away from Rodrygo and now Fede, as we know, who's lights out on the right wing in attack. And a lot of the names we were linked with were not. And there was two players that I think really made sense this summer to sign. One was Serge Gnabry, the other one was Edin Dzeko. So I never said we don't need offensive reinforcements, but I always was vocal that you need to make sure they're the right profile, because you either sign someone who's not good enough like Jovic, who doesn't play, and they just rot on the bench, or you sign someone kind of good but not good enough to justify stalling Rodrygo's development, or you sign someone good enough to justify that. Like, so the names would have been people like Bernardo Silva, Serge Gnabry, and Dzeko. I think would have been a really good signing because he may not demand a huge amount of playing time at this age. He may want to just be a part of a championship team. He would have played a lot this season. He's in good form for Inter. So it was never that I didn't want offensive reinforcements. It was that you just have to make sure the signing makes sense. All right. Tarek Wallen says, "Whoa, they just updated. Now I lost everything." Oh man, there's so many new comments. What the heck? Okay. This is the thing with YouTube, as I've noticed, is that the longer you're on, the more the viewership increases and the comments just start flooding in. So you kind of start taking time with the questions at the beginning, and then you realize you start falling way behind. All right. Let me get back on track here. Tarek Wallen says, "Do you think we should have stuck with Odegaard instead of getting Camavinga? I know Camavinga is young and has enough time, but just want to know your input." Well, the reality with Odegaard was, and I think often we need to remind people of this, is that this was not a matter of Real Madrid wanted to sell Odegaard. They just wanted him to fight for his place in the squad and not come in and just demand certain things when he hasn't proven anything yet at the Real Madrid level. And he decided not to do that, and he himself wanted to leave. And that was his choice. And this has always been something important to Florentino Perez, where he says, look, if you don't want to, if you're not 100% willing to be here, then see you later. We don't care what your name is. You can go and fight somewhere else. You can do that somewhere else. Camavinga never had that problem. Rodrygo, Vinicius, these guys never made a fuss. They worked their way into the squad. And that was the expectation of Odegaard. He was not buying into that, and he's gone. So it's not really a club decision at that point. All right. Manan Jane says, "Hey Keon, what are your thoughts on Carvajal as a player now?" Well, I think he's a player that is a good leader, and regardless of how bad he looks sometimes on the pitch, is someone who puts his entire heart out on the field and is a massive Madridista and works his tail off. And while the intention is good and the love is there, and I think, and let's actually, before I get into any of that, he deserves a lot of respect because in the Champions League knockouts last season, he rose the call after a shaky, I would say, the PSG tie, not so great, but there was that game against Chelsea where he had to play center back in extra time. He put every ounce of energy out on the field. Against Liverpool, he did a great job on Luis Diaz, and he deserves a lot of respect for that. Biggest moments of the season, he stood up. The reality with him now too is that he's physically not the same player he used to be. While he works hard, you can kind of see he's a step slow, tracking in transition. He can get muscle off the ball sometimes, and also he's not able to take players on offensively. He can put a great cross in still, but he can't beat a player and then get a great cross in the way he used to, like in 2017. That becomes extra problematic also when your left back Furlan Mendy can't attack. So that's the reality of the situation right now. All right. What's up, Patrick with Diafati? Just wanted to give a shout out. Kiko and Fetty says, I have heard you and others on the Managing Madrid podcast say that Rodrygo has shown that he's not necessarily a long-time solution to replace Benzema. Who do you think suits that profile? Well, the question of who is a tricky one, obviously, because Benzema is going to be here till 2024. At least, who knows beyond that. I suppose if he stays beyond 2024, it might be in a more minimal role off the bench as a backup. But who that is in 2 years, I'm not sure. I would love for it to be Holland, but I have no idea how this is going to play out. But I think Rodrygo has shown to be that he is a player who can play that role in emergency situations or here and there. But as the guy to rely on, consistently is going to be tough. He's a great off-ball mover. He's a great finisher. I guess great is relative, but he's a good finisher, and he's a good link-up player. He can do all that, but consistently would be tough. So I don't think he's like the future number 9. I'll put it that way. Let's see. Ayush Anand says it's Tony Kroos having the best season at Real Madrid. I think this is arguably his best season ever. Yeah. Part of the reason is because he has new wrinkles defensively that he's never had. He's always been good behind the ball as a presser, but has been pretty lazy with his tracking, or just has always been jogging in transition. I'm releasing a big Kroos column. I'm doing a deep dive, watching some film, posting some clips in the article, and also going through a lot of data. Defensively, he's just on another level this season. I mean, I think he's tied with Tchouaméni on the team for first place in tackles per game. He was a defensive monster. He put Frankie and Rafinha in his pocket, covering for the fullbacks against Barca. Same thing against Sevilla and so many other games this season. The defensive side of things, I mean, he's just giving an extra push. And maybe that's because it's his last season. Maybe it's the last dance. I'm not sure. I hope not, but he has been amazing. Oh man, it did that thing again where it's just like a flood of new messages. I lost track of where I was. All right. Warisul says, how did your fandom begin with Raul? Which moment made you a fan, to be precise? I don't think it was a moment, and I don't think it was only Raul. I was a fan of the team even before I knew who Raul was. So, like, to give you perspective, as I've said many times before, my dad was a Real Madrid fan since 1966. And so I was born into a Madridista family. And when, I think the first game I watched was the 1998 Champions League final. It was 97, 98, the one in Amsterdam. But it was more of an observer. It was um, not something like I was really young. Like I was like 10 at that time. So I was just kind of watching it in the background with my dad, but I wasn't really into it. But something happened, like over the course of that summer with the World Cup being in 98. And I was like, whoa, World Cup is so cool. And then that's when I started to really care about it. And and then once I started watching the games and realized because Raul was the star then, he really helped kind of suck me into the entire fandom. So I don't know if there was a specific moment or anything, but the first flashbulb moments I can remember from Raul are like goals in that Champions League in I think 98, 99 range. And that was when Real Madrid were actually really bad. We were eliminated to Dinamo Kiev. That was when Dinamo Kiev had Shevchenko. And I remember Raul scoring this brilliant goal with his right foot in the snow and the ball was orange. So I have flashbulb memories of that, but I don't know if there was one specific moment. Um, okay. Flores Patine says, "Why do you think Vinicius still has so much scrutiny on him? Because he proved so many people wrong, like Lucas Nevarete." So I mean, I always find it a little bit funny when people scrutinize Vinicius because this is a player who has wildly exceeded expectations so far. He is ahead of schedule, if you ask me, and he's a work in progress, and he's still really young. And he was the best winger in Europe last season. Was absolutely crucial to us winning the double. In his down season, quote unquote down season this year, he's been still really productive. Has there been some regressions in certain aspects of his game? Sure. Has he been absolutely people kicking the shit out of him? Yeah. It's just growing pains. It's very simple. And even the growing pains are not nearly that as bad as, you would think they would be given the reaction of the fan base. I think expectations of people at Real Madrid have always been very high. But sometimes we forget the human element that these kids aren't robots. Growth is not linear, and just some patience. He's fine. So yeah, I don't really resonate with the scrutiny. I do think it's fair to criticize on certain things, but I think what Carlos doing with him now and the way he's kind of grooming him, I think makes sense. You just kind of let him go through some of these growing pains. You let him make some of these makes, and I always make this point with Vinicius. People tend to remember the things he gets wrong. Like if he tries to dribble past 5 players, maybe he fails 3 times, succeeds twice. People seem to remember the 3 failures more than the 2 great stuff. This all comes with the package. You don't get the game-changing version of Vinicius without some of the mistakes that come with it. Because the moment you try to shut him down, you lose all of it. Let him express himself the way he would. Like he got a lot of criticism for the rainbow flick on social media, which made no sense to me. Let him express himself. Let him be who he is. Over time, he'll just channel that and be a little bit more efficient as he grows older. But I do think a lot of the scrutiny is wrong. Kaka says, "Hello, Kian Love from Nepal. How can I apply to write articles for Managing Madrid or come on your podcast?" Well, getting on the podcast now is virtually impossible unless you're basically a patron who joins the Zoom calls and you can get your question in, or you can ask questions or whatever. But these are to get into Managing Madrid. My suggestion would be to make sure you have articles written somewhere and then just send those along. Another great way to start, like, Om Arvin started this way, fan posts. Go write fan posts on Managing Madrid, and you might get noticed if your work is really good. Let's see. Oof, Fiorentina game has started. Whatever. Ooh, there's a lot here. Let me see. Kiko Infetti says, if you could interview any Madrid player, 1 from the current squad, 2 from the 2000 period until now, who would you love to interview? From the current squad, it would be either Chouameni or Kroos. From the 2000 period, it would be no brainer Raul. Provide like assuming that I wouldn't just shake out of and just sweat and just piss my pants being in the presence of him, because that literally happened to me once when I met him for the first time. He is like on a completely different pedestal to me. Ryan says, "Is Bellingham a good fit?" I already answered it. You can go back and watch it if you joined late. Let me see. Ayman Ghatu says, "Will Real Madrid ever go for a quote unquote systems manager, or are they always doomed to begin with because there's no time for a process?" I don't think so. Like that's an interesting question. I mean, this is a topic that comes up every now and then, and it will probably come back at some point once we start losing the whole identity thing and systems thing. What Real Madrid prioritize more than anything is winning, right? Systems, quote unquote systems, and there's always a system. It's if there's winning, there is a system. Like Ancelotti has a system. Zidane had a system. And in fact, they had multiple systems. So this idea that they don't have tactics or systems has always been nonsense. But there's like always this the way we that is portrayed in the media is that, certain managers have quote unquote more identity or a more sophisticated or complex or more um kind of one way identity where it's like we play like this. Real Madrid has never cared about that. All they care about is titles. So the answer is systems. A specific system would work, provided as the titles come with it. So it doesn't matter. The problem with like if the answer, but you answered your question kind of. I'm on where you said there's no time for a process. Are they doomed to begin with? If someone with a system comes into place and says, "This is my system. It's a 2-3 year project. We're gonna go through 2-3 years of no titles, but in by year 3 we'll be a well-oiled machine." Real Madrid will say, "See you later." They won't even entertain the idea. If someone comes in and just starts winning and tries a few different things, Ancelotti last season tried a very, very aggressive high press at the beginning of the season, scored a bunch of goals, conceded a bunch of goals, and then stopped that, did something completely opposite where he switched to counter-attacking defensive football, even against low-tier teams, and he started winning. That's all that matters to an extent. And I think at least in the context of this Real Madrid, that's what matters most. I mean, we've seen Fabio Capello get fired in the past for playing one brand of football that Real Madrid didn't resonate with, although I would argue that last Capello season, I mean, he's been fired twice for winning leagues and not doing it entertaining way. But I would definitely argue in 2007 when he got fired, actually, I really enjoyed that brand of football because it was quite heroic. But this whole system thing, it's not about systems to me. It's more about patience. If you win, you can have whatever system you want in place. If you're not winning, that there's just not going to be much patience there. That's how it works at Real Madrid anyway. Faye says, "Really missed the trio of Keon, Omen, Matt in the podcast." Me too, man. It'll come back. Matt is raising a newborn along with his wife, so that's prioritized right now. And is really busy with Femenino stuff, but he'll come on. Neelish says, "Fun question. What is your favorite Twitter account?" Shea Serrano is one that I really enjoy. It's funny, like I don't check Twitter anymore. I don't look on notifications. I don't even really do that on any platform. But there are basically a few people who I follow on Twitter that will come across my feed and I enjoy their stuff. And they're all basically basketball people. So Shea Serrano, if you like, I guess, some humor in your tweets and someone really successful and inspiring, you can go follow him. Let me see. Maybe I'll take a couple more. Ahmed Ibrahim says, "If Madrid is not going to improve after the second half of the season, we can easily say goodbye to the Champions League and any silver coming our way." What's your take? I mean, there's nothing to disagree with there. If Real Madrid doesn't improve in the second half of the season, they will say goodbye to the Champions League and any silver coming our way. Yeah, that's a factual statement. Um, Ashutosh Kumar says underdogs for the World Cup. I don't know. It's always someone we don't expect, which I guess is why they're an underdog. Um, but I'll stay close to home and I'll say, look out for Canada. This is a team that cruised through World Cup qualifiers, the first team in history to beat the US and Mexico twice in the CONCACAF qualifiers. Our best player in history, Alfonso Davies, is our Alfredo Di Stefano. He's there. Provided everyone stays healthy, we're a team that'll play really good counterattacking football. We'll physically bully opponents. We got that dog in us, so look out for that. Yeah, let's wrap it there. We'll wrap with this comment. Madrid Maniac Ankit says, "Hey Keon, love your brother. Wish you all the happiness in the world." Thank you, man. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you all. You guys, I mean, this is honestly just fired this up on YouTube. Didn't even really make an announcement apart from like 30 minutes before on YouTube on a post, which I don't even know if people see posts and not videos and stuff. But you guys you guys tuned in, a lot of you, and kept growing as it went on. So if you joined late, don't worry about it. I'm going to post this whole thing. You can watch it from the beginning. You can also listen to it over on managingmadrid.com. It'll be posted on the website. You can also subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast app. And one more thing, tomorrow over on patreon.com/managing Madrid, Lucas Navarrete and I are doing the weekly Real Madrid mailbag. We're doing 2 mailbags next week because we missed last week because I was traveling back from Spain. And yeah, if you want to get your questions into Lucas and I and also access the podcast, go to patreon.com/managing Madrid. And yeah, stay tuned for the announcement on the Toronto podcast. And we'll sign off here. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you. Peace and love. Hala Madrid.